Good morning, students. This is the fifth lecture for NMR spectroscopy. Up to the previous class, we learned about how to simplify the proton NMR spectrum, a complex proton NMR spectrum. In that, according to your syllabus, we have studied 4 techniques for simplification. Now, today's class, we are going to discuss about the application of proton NMR spectroscopy for discrimination, for discrimination of enantiomeric pairs, that is discrimination of enantiomers. Discrimination of enantiomers. Now, what are enantiomers? Enantiomers are the pair of isomers with non-superimposable mirror images. The non-superimposable mirror images are called as enantiomers. So, a enantiomeric mixture contains 2 isomers. The enantiomeric mixture, the isomer present in the enantiomeric mixture possesses similar physical property and also possesses similar chemical property So whatever the isomers present in the enantiomeric pair have the same physical property and same chemical property. Hence, normally they cannot separated. The isomers of enantiomeric mixture cannot be separated due to the same physical property, same chemical property. Therefore, under laboratory technique or under normal condition, the enantiomers are separated by converting a pair of enantiomers into their diastereomers with the treatment of certain reagents which are capable to form a diastereomer by reacting with enantiomeric pair. Are you following? So under normal condition, the enantiomers themselves are not separated. The isomers of enantiomers are not separable, are not possible to separate due to the same physical and chemical property. Hence, in general, the enantiomers are separated by transforming enantiomer into diastereomer with the treatment of certain specific reagents. The reagents are capable to convert enantiomers into diastereomers by reacting with them. We know the diastereomers are non-superimposable non-mirror images, where enantiomers are non-superimposable mirror images. Now here the diastereomers are non-superimposable non-mirror images. We know which possesses dissimilar physical property and dissimilar chemical property. Hence they can be easily separated. The diastereomers can be easily separated. After the separation of diastereomers, the reagent what we use to transform enantiomer into diastereomers will be detached from the diastereomer to get enantiomers separately. So this is the generally used technique for separation of enantiomers. Example, a enantiomeric pair consisting the 2 isomers R and S. R and S plus R minus. These are enantiomers. Enantiomeric pair. A enantiomeric mixture consisting of 2 isomers, R isomer and S isomer, or plus isomer or minus isomer. Now, normally they are treated. First, they are treated with a specific reagent, say R star, to transform them into a pair of diastereomers, where the reagent react with both R isomer and also S isomer to form R star, R star, S R star, S and R star. This is a diastereomers. A diastereomers are formed. A mixture of diastereomers are formed when reacted a reagent, a specific reagent with isomers, R isomer and S isomer of enantiomeric mixture. Now, a isomers present in the diastereomeric mixture differ with respect to each other in their physical property and chemical property, hence separated. They are separated. R star separately appear, S R star. Now here R isomer reacted with R star is the reagent, S isomer reacted with R star. So the diastereomers are separated easily. Separation. The diastereomers can be easily separated from each other and regenerated to R isomer to S isomer. Here it is R star. And after separation of diastereomers from each other, the R group, R star, which we added initially to be transformed an enantiomer into diastereomer, will be detached from the diastereomer, which are separated easily, to get R isomer and S isomer separately. So this is the general procedure for discrimination or separation of an enantiomers from its mixture. So the enantiomer directly not possible to separate because of same property, therefore transformed by treating with a specific reagent into a diastereomers. The diastereomers both will differ in their both physical and chemical property, hence can be easily separated. After their separation, we can regenerate or we can recover R isomer, S isomer separately simply by detaching the R group which we initially added. So this is the general procedure, a chemical method of discrimination of enantiomers. Is it clear? Now coming to the problem. If the formation of diastereomer, this step, first step, if the formation of diastereomer by reacting an enantiomer, each enantiomer of the enantiomeric mixture with R star, that is reagent, a specific reagent, if the reaction is irreversible. That is, in brief, if the formation of diastereomer is irreversible, then after their separation, the regeneration to get each isomer separately become difficult when if it is irreversible. If this reaction, transformation of enantiomer into diastereomer reacting with R star, if the reaction is irreversible, then it is not possible to regenerate R and S isomer by detaching R star. When the reaction is irreversible, what happens? R star may not be detached from the diastereomer. Therefore, we may not get R and S isomer separately. So somewhat difficulty arises if the reaction is irreversible. Therefore, the NMR technique is applied to discriminate the enantiomers. Under these conditions, where we have discussed about the general procedure for their discrimination, sometimes if the diastereomeric conversion from enantiomer is irreversible process, then their regeneration, the enantiomers, that is R and S isomer regeneration, detaching the R star from the diastereomeric mixture become somewhat difficult, may not be possible sometimes. Therefore, the NMR technique is the analytical technique, could be used for the discrimination of enantiomers, Now, there are different NMR techniques used for their discrimination. Now, what is the difference between general procedure of discrimination and discrimination with the help of proton NMR spectroscopy is that under normal condition, first we should use certain reagents to transform enantiomers into diastereomers, and after that, for the regeneration, we should use either acids or bases to detach the R star to get the S isomer R isomer separately. And this technique is slower technique. The discrimination using a chemical method of separation or general method of discrimination is a slower one. There may be loss of S isomer and R isomer. We may not get the exact extent of R isomer, S isomer originally existed in the enantiomer after their separation. There may be loss of certain proportion of R isomer, S isomer during the process of conversion into diastereomer and regeneration into enantiomers separately. We may not get 100% R isomer, S isomer. Somewhat less proportion we may get. So that is the difficulty. Whereas in the NMR technique, where a technique is very simple, a technique is very fast, there may not be loss of any component, any proportion of R isomer or S isomer. So somewhat advantage. It is an instrumental based one. It has many advantages. We can recover the whole component, whole proportion of R isomer, S isomer easily, and then it is the fastest technique and its accuracy is more. The accuracy of proton NMR in discrimination of enantiomer is more. Therefore, we may use a proton NMR technique for their discrimination. Are you followed? Now let us study the use of proton NMR in their discrimination. Now, number one, discrimination of enantiomers using chiral NMR solvent. Chiral NMR solvent. Discrimination of enantiomers, isomers of enantiomeric pair using chiral NMR solvents. Now, say you take, say this is R isomer, say this is the structure of R isomer, this is the structure of S isomer, this is a enantiomeric mixture. Enantiomeric mixture. Now, each isomer R and S isomer of the enantiomeric mixture, just now we discussed, have same physical, chemical as well as spectral properties. You see, in a simple way, a R isomer, S isomer of the enantiomeric mixture, both will have same physical property, same chemical property, and also same spectral property. That means the signal, the absorption frequency of the protons present in R isomer and S isomer will be the same. The absorption the similar spectral property, meaning of similar spectral property is that the absorption frequency of the proton present in S isomer and R isomer is the same. The proton absorption frequency, however the protons present in different isomer, the protons of R isomer and protons of S isomer, but the frequency values are same, called as identical spectral property. Identical spectral property. Say for example, if a proton of R isomer say appear at 3.0 Again the proton of S isomer also appear at 3.0. So this is the meaning of identical spectral properties. Is it clear? Now coming to discrimination using chiral NMR solvents. Chiral NMR solvents include like gelatin, polyguanidine, cholesterol chloride. Etc. solvents. So as a chiral NMR solvents, either gelatin or polyguanidine or cholesterol fluorides are used. Any one of the solvent is used. Now, however, the spectral properties of isomers of enantiomers are same. That means the values, absorption frequency values of protons in both isomers are same. But when we add chiral solvents, some chiral solvents to the sample, that is to the enantiomeric mixture, what happens? In the presence of chiral solvents, each isomer of enantiomeric pair may be oriented in different way. You see, before before addition of solvent, there is no solvent. Both isomers are oriented in the same way, horizontal and horizontal. Now, before adding NMR solvent, because of similar property, both isomers are oriented in the same manner and appear with the same spectral property. Absorption frequency of proton of R isomer and S isomers are same. Now when we add chiral solvent, to that mixture of enantiomer, what happens? In the presence of chiral solvent, the isomers of enantiomeric pair oriented in a different way. Say for example, this is R isomer oriented horizontally. Say S isomer may oriented vertically. S isomer, this is enantiomeric pair. A simple principle involved in the presence of chiral solvent. The orientation of S isomer and R isomer is different. Their situation in the presence of chiral solvent is different. One may be oriented, say, horizontally, other may be oriented vertically. Is it clear? So this is the effect of chiral solvent. Chiral solvent induced to orient each isomer in a different way. Now we know when the isomers are oriented in a different way, their chemical anisotropy will be different. We have studied about anisotropic effect with respect to the orientation of a molecule in your first semester. Now in brief, when the isomers are oriented in different way, their chemical anisotropy will be different. So depending upon chemical anisotropy, the absorption frequencies are different. Now initially both isomers are oriented in the same way, that is chemical anisotropy of first isomer and second isomer is same. Absorption frequencies are also same. In the presence of chiral solvent, when these isomers are oriented in different way, one horizontally, other may be vertically, what happens? Their chemical anisotropy will become different. That is anisotropic effect. Under horizontal orientation is different from under vertical orientation. Therefore, the absorption we know the absorption frequencies are depends upon the orientation. That is called as anisotropic effect. So when the isomers are oriented in different way, their absorption frequencies become different. So with that difference, we can discriminate the enantiomers. With the difference, initially the absorption frequency of proton of both isomers are same. We cannot discriminate. When we add some chiral solvent, what happens? That affected the orientation of the molecule, the orientation of the isomer. So isomers are oriented in different way. That leads to change in the chemical anisotropy followed by change in the absorption frequency. Even though a small difference in the absorption frequency, it is possible or we are able to discriminate the enantiomers. Is it clear? For example, you take NH2. Say this is asymmetric carbon where it is 2-phenyl propanolamine. Now this is asymmetric carbon. Say this is plus and minus isomer. Now when we record the spectrum of this molecule, we have a signal for CH proton. This is CH proton signal. A signal for CH proton, say R isomer, and the signal for same proton, say S isomer. You observe, this is in the absence of solvent. In the absence of solvent, this is the plus or minus enantiomeric pair, where a CH proton in the R isomer, say this is the absorption frequency. The same proton in the S isomer also have the same absorption frequency. The absorption frequency of the CH proton will be same in both S isomer and R isomer. We cannot distinguish or we cannot discriminate. But when we add chiral solvent to that, chiral NMR solvent, when we add chiral NMR solvent, you see what happens. A CH proton signal of R isomer, a CH proton signal of S isomer, CH proton signal of S isomer. In between the absorption frequency of CH proton of R isomer, CH proton of S isomer, there is a 0.18 ppm frequency difference. 0.18 ppm. This is the difference. Now this is the difference between the absorption frequency of CH proton R isomer and CH proton S isomer will be 0.18 ppm. Delta nu is equal to 0.18 ppm. Therefore, they may be discriminated. Now, initially, before adding the chiral solvent, what you observed, the absorption frequency of the CH proton in both isomer will be same. We cannot discriminate. Now, when we add a chiral solvent, what you observed, there is a difference in the absorption frequency of CH proton of R isomer to S isomer will be 0.18 ppm. This difference is enough to discriminate the enantiomer, which is R isomer and which is S isomer. Now what happens in the presence of chiral solvent? In the presence of chiral solvent, both plus isomer and minus isomers are oriented in different way. That will leads to change in the chemical anisotropy and also change in the absorption frequency. Therefore, there is a difference in the absorption frequency of the same proton from one isomer to other isomer. That difference is enough to discriminate the enantiomers. So this is the use of chiral NMR solvents. Now coming to the second method of discrimination. Discrimination of enantiomers using chiral lanthanide shift reagents. Discrimination of enantiomers using chiral lanthanide shift reagents. We discussed in the previous class about the lanthanide shift reagents. What are the lanthanide shift reagents? Beta diketonato complexes of europium or praseodymium. We have seen that three complexes. One is europium FOD complex. Europium FOD complex. The other one is europium DPM complex. Other one is europium FACAM complex. These are the three complexes we have learned in the previous class. For what purpose? For simplification. Europium FOD, europium DPM, europium FACAM. What is FOD? Fluorooctanodionate ligand. I have given a structure also. What is DPM? Dipivalium ligand. Three ligands of dipivalium coordinated with europium. And FACAM, fluoroacetyl camphorate. FACAM is the abbreviated form of fluoroacetyl camphorate. It is a ligand bound with europium. Here it may be europium or it may be praseodymium plus 3. All these complexes are chiral lanthanide shift reagents. So these complexes can be used for the discrimination of enantiomers. Is it clear? Now coming to the principle, how to discriminate the enantiomers using chiral lanthanide shift reagents. Now this method of discrimination is quite similar to the general method which initially we discussed. This technique is exactly similar to the technique of general method of discrimination. That is, in this technique the enantiomers are converted into diastereomers similar to general method. The enantiomers are converted into a diastereomers with the help of chiral lanthanide shift reagents. A diastereomers are separated from each other, and then the S isomer and R isomer or plus isomer or minus isomers are regenerated separately, simply detaching the chiral lanthanide shift reagents. Is it clear? So this is quite similar to general method of discrimination. Now what is the difference? Now in the general method of discrimination we have discussed about under the circumstance of irreversible diastereomer formation, regeneration is not possible. But coming to this method also same to the general method, where the enantiomers are transforming into diastereomer with the help of using chiral lanthanide shift reagents. After that the enantiomers are regenerated separately by detaching the chiral lanthanide shift reagents. Here the diastereomeric formation is reversible, not irreversible, because the diastereomers are formed reacting the enantiomers of isomers of enantiomeric mixture with a chiral lanthanide shift reagent through only coordination bond. Because of coordination during the formation of diastereomer, we can simply regenerate the isomers. So this is about chiral lanthanide shift reagents. For example, For example, you take CH2 CH NH2 COOH. It is an amino acid. Now this is plus and minus, an enantiomeric pair. Now it is treated with EU any one complex. Say I am going to take FOD complex. EU FOD complex. Now this complex reacted with the isomers of enantiomeric pair to form a diastereomer like this. This is CH2 CH NH2 COOH. C double bond. Now COH C double bond O. Coordination with europium FOD complex. This is coordination bond. What happens? An amino acid through the carboxylic acid group, that is oxygen non-bonding electrons, involved in the coordination with europium +3 ion present in the complex. These are the chiral lanthanide shift reagents. They form a coordination bond with each isomer of enantiomeric pair to be transformed into this is a diastereomer. Say it may be R. Another one, CH2 CH NH2 star C double bond O OH, coordination with europium FOD complex. Say this is S. What happens? An enantiomeric pair is transformed into diastereomer by the process of a simple coordination through oxygen non-bonding electron with an europium atom of the complex to form R and S. This is a diastereomeric mixture. A diastereomeric mixture. Is it clear? Now we know the diastereomeric mixture. Now a diastereomeric mixture, each diastereomer is separated, S1 R1. Is it clear? Now regeneration. Now from the diastereomer, the complex is easily detached after separation. This is separation. After their separation, say CH CH2 CH NH2 C double bond O OH europium. Now CH CH2 CH NH2 C double bond O OH europium. Say this is S isomer, this is R isomer. Now from the diastereomeric mixture, each diastereomer can be easily separated. After that, detaching a europium complex from the diastereomer. It is very easy, as it is a simple process of coordination associated by the process of a simple coordination bond, can be easily detached europium complex from the diastereomer to get R isomer and S isomer separately. R and S isomer separately. So this is about use of lanthanide shift reagents to discriminate the enantiomers. Now you have a third method. Now you have a third method to be studied for enantiomeric discrimination, that is third one, using Moser's acid. Using Moser's acid, discrimination of enantiomers using a Moser's acid. It is Moser's acid is a CHCOOH. OCH3CH3. This is Moser's acid, where it is a phenyl acetic acid. On CH carbon there is a two groups, OCH3 and CH3. It is a Moser's acid. Moser's acid is used as a reagent to discriminate the enantiomers. Now this method is also quite similar to that of general method or to that of use of lanthanide shift reagents, where this technique involved transformation of enantiomers into diastereomers by reacting with Moser's acid. After that, the diastereomers are separated and the Moser's acid is detached from the diastereomer to get each R isomer and S isomer separately. So this technique is quite similar to the general method. Now this technique is used, Moser's acid is used for the discrimination of enantiomeric pair of only alcohols. Now where a enantiomeric pair, isomers of the enantiomeric pair, that is alcohols, which are transformed into diastereomers with the help of use of Moser's acid, where the Moser's acid reacted with a enantiomeric alcohol to form an ester. The diastereomeric formation is due to ester bond formation, which is reversible. Hence, the Moser's acid can be easily detached from the diastereomer to get S isomer, R isomer separately. Is it clear? This technique is useful for the discrimination of enantiomeric mixture of alcohols only, where the enantiomeric mixture of alcohols are reacted with a Moser's acid, as it contains a COOH functional group. Through it reacted with alcoholic mixture, that is enantiomeric mixture of alcohol, and form an ester bond which is reversible. When it is reversible, we can easily regenerate R isomer and S isomer from diastereomer simply by the process of hydrolysis of ester. Now example. You take, say, CH3 hydrogen ethyl OH. This is an alcohol, plus or minus enantiomeric mixture of alcohol. This is enantiomeric alcohol. Now when it reacted with Moser's acid, OCH3 CH3. This is Moser's acid, where I have written a phenyl ring in a abbreviated pH. OCH3 CH3 COOH. It is a Moser's acid. It reacted with a OH group of alcohols of enantiomeric pair to form CH3 hydrogen ethyl oxygen, C double bond O, CH, OCH3, CH3, a pH. Similarly, CH3, P hydrogen, ethyl group, oxygen, C double bond O, CH, OCH3, CH3, phenyl. Now these two are a diastereomers, a simple reaction, simple esterification reaction, where alcohol get reacted with a carboxylic acid group of Mother's acid to form an ester. This is a diastereomer. A diastereomeric mixture. Now each isomer of each diastereomer from the mixture can be separated easily. Separated easily. After their separation, say first isomer, second isomer, first diastereomer, second diastereomer. After their separation, a simple hydrolysis leading to ester bond breakage. Now ester bond get cleaved to give R isomer, S isomer separately. This is a discrimination of enantiomers using Mother's acid. So these are the three methods included in your syllabus for the discrimination of enantiomers. One is using chiral solvents, using lanthanide shift reagents. The other one is use of Mother's acid for the discrimination. So this technique is for only alcoholic enantiomer separation or discrimination. So with this, the discrimination of enantiomers is completed. Now we are going to discuss about a new topic. A new topic, that is fluxinol behavior, fluxinolity. Fluxinolity. This is the last topic of NMR spectroscopy. Fluxinolity. Let us study what is fluxinolity. Let us know what is fluxinolity. Now, the exchange of atom or a group of atom from one position to the other position, which is symmetrical one to the first, leading to n number of isomers which are identical with each other. Exchange of atom or group of atom from one position to their symmetry position leads to another isomer which is identical to the first one. For example, you take cyclopentadiene cation, cyclopentadiene attached with a metal ion. This is M, metal, this is hydrogen. Is it clear? Say for example, now exchange of metal from this position to this position. You see what happens. Say this is metal. Metal get exchanged from this carbon to its adjacent carbon, leading to this isomer, or it may further exchange to third position. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3. Is it clear? See what happens. The exchange of atom or sometimes group of atom, that is a group. Exchange of atom or group from one position to the other position within the molecule. Exchange is within the molecule from one position to the other position leads to the formation of a new isomer which is identical to the first one. Now from second to we have a third isomer where the metal get exchanged here. The metal in the first isomer get exchanged from first carbon to the second carbon, followed by the third carbon, leading to the different isomers where 1 and 2 are identical. 1 is equal to 2 is equal to 3. Now this behavior is called as fluxinality. What is fluxinality? Exchange of atom or group of atom from one position to the other position within the molecule leading to the isomer of the same to the first one. This behavior is called as fluxinality. The molecules which exhibited fluxinality are called as fluxinal molecules. Are you followed? Exchange of atom or group of atom from one position to the other position within the same molecule leads to a new isomer which is identical to the first one from which it exchanged, that is to the identical to the first one. So this behavior is called as fluxinal behavior. Whatever the molecule exhibited this behavior is called as fluxinality, fluxinal molecules, fluxinal molecules. Is it clear? Now some examples were included in the syllabus regarding under the fluxinality, fluxinal behavior. We have to identify, we have to establish their fluxinal behavior with the help of NMR spectroscopy. Is it clear? Now fluxinality, the fluxinal behavior of the molecule can be studied with the help of NMR spectroscopy. With the help of NMR spectroscopy. For example, you take bulvalene. Example 1, bulvalene. Bulvalene, where C10H10, it contains 10 carbons and 10 hydrogens. Now bulvalene is a fluxinal molecule. With the help of proton NMR spectroscopy, we can establish, or we can say, yes, it is a fluxinal molecule. Now its a structure. Now this is carbon 1, carbon 2, carbon 3, carbon 4, carbon 5, carbon 6, carbon 7, carbon 8. Now carbon 9, carbon 10. There is a double bond here, one double bond here, one double bond between 3-4 carbon, one double bond between 6 and 7 carbon, and a bond between 2nd and 8th carbon. This is bulvalene structure, where it has 10 carbons, 10 hydrogens. Say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. This is carbon 9, carbon 10. One double bond, two double bond, three. One double bond between 3-4 carbon, other double bond between 9-10 carbon, the third double bond between 6 and 7 carbon. There is a single bond between 8th and 2nd and 8th carbons. So this is the structure of bulvalene. Now by the process of Cope rearrangement, Cope, bulvalene undergo Cope rearrangement, like this bond, 2-8 bond get cleaved to polarize between 7 and 8th carbon, and 6th and 7th pi bond get polarized to form a new bond with 4th carbon, and double bond between 3-4 carbons Now, when bond between two 8 carbon is cleaved, there is a positive charge on second carbon. Now, a pi bond between 7 carbons when polarized to form a new bond with fourth carbon, the 3,4 double bond get migrated to 2,3 carbon as 2 bear positive charge. A simple mechanism. This single bond between 2,8 carbon is polarized towards 7,8 carbon. 6,7 double bond get formed a new sigma bond with fourth carbon. 3,4 double bond is migrated in between 2 to 3 carbon to get carbon 1, carbon 2, carbon 3, carbon 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, there is a double bond unchanged between 9, 10 carbon. This is 9th carbon, this is 10th carbon. Now you see what happens. Now, when the double bond between 3, 4 carbon get migrated to 2, 3 carbon, 2, 3 carbon. Now this bond is disappeared between 2, 8 carbon and form a new pi bond between 7, 8 carbon, and 6, 7 pi bond get migrated and form a new sigma bond with fourth carbon. Between 6th and 4th carbon there is a sigma bond. There is a sigma bond. This is Cope rearrangement reaction. You see what happens. Now this is 1, this is 2. 1 and 2. Is it clear? Now, exchange of the bonds from the first structure. Say this is Bulwelin structure, structure 1. By the exchange of a bond, sigma and pi bond between the different carbons through a Cope rearrangement, it gives a new isomer, that is structure 2. This structure is identical with the first structure because the first structure, you observe, the first structure contains one 3-membered ring between 1 to 8 carbon. Now second structure also contains one 3-membered ring between 4, 5, 6 carbons. The first structure has 2 double bonds, 3 double bonds, 1 double bond, 2 double bond, 3 double bond. The second structure also has 1 double bond, 2 double bond, 3 double bond. Therefore it is identical. So it is a tricyclic. This is also tricyclic. One is 8-membered ring, one is 3-membered ring, another one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-membered ring. So the two structures are the tricyclic rings. One 7-membered ring, one 8-membered ring, one 3-membered ring. The second structure also has 7-membered ring, 8-membered ring, 3-membered ring. It is also a tricyclic. Both will have the 2, 3 double bonds. Both will have the 3-membered rings. Just their position is different. What happens? Now, exchange of the bond from one position to other position within the same molecule gives another isomer which is identical to the first one. Therefore, this behavior, so called as fluxinal behavior, the molecule of Bulwelin is called as fluxinal molecule. So this is fluxinal molecule. So with the help of NMR spectroscopy, we can establish its fluxinal behavior. Yes. Now theoretically we are saying Bulwelin is a fluxinal molecule and showing its reaction, Cope rearrangement, where through the Cope rearrangement it will be transformed between 1 and 2 structures to give two isomers which are identical. Say it is a fluxinal molecule and its behavior will be fluxinal behavior. Now with the help of NMR we can study its fluxinality or fluxinal behavior. Let us study how. Now Bulwelin contain 6 sp2 carbons, 4 sp3 carbons. 6 sp2 carbons, 4 sp3 carbons. Therefore we would expect the two signals, but at room temperature, that is at higher temperature, it gives only one signal. it give only one signal. At lower temperature, now this is at room temperature. At room temperature, it gives only one signal. As temperature decreasing, slowly as the temperature get decreased, you see what happens. There is a change in the signal pattern. Like this. You see the change in the spectrum. At room temperature, only one signal for all hydrogens, irrespective of sp3 carbon, protons on sp3 carbon, protons on sp2 carbon. When the temperature is down, when the temperature is decreased, slowly sp3 carbon gets separated from sp2 carbons. Here, somewhat separation, all separation. Say this is sp3, a protons on sp3 carbon. This is protons on sp2 carbon. 6 hydrogen, 4 hydrogens. 4 hydrogens are attached to sp3 carbon. 6 hydrogens are attached to sp2 carbon because it contains 3 double bonds. Is it clear? What happens? The bulvalin at room temperature appearing, however, it contains two type of proton, two type of non-equivalent protons. sp3 protons, protons on sp3 carbon, protons on sp2 carbon. Is it clear? But at room temperature, irrespective of their nature, all protons are appearing as one signal. When the temperature decreases, both sp2 and sp3 signals are separated. What happens? Room temperature means higher temperature. At higher temperature, the exchange between first structure to second structure, the co-rearrangement, rate of co-rearrangement is fast. The exchange between first structure to second structure is so fast. During that exchange, sp3 carbons becoming sp2, sp2 carbons becoming sp3. Are you following? At higher temperature, where the exchange of double bonds and single bonds between structure 1 and structure 2 is fast. That is, rate of co-rearrangement is fast. During this transformation, during this exchange, sp3 carbons becoming sp2, sp2 carbons becoming sp3. When the exchange is fast, we cannot distinguish which carbon is sp3, which carbon is sp2. That means the protons attached to sp3 carbon and sp2 carbons become equivalent. Hence one signal appear. As the temperature is decreased, what happens? The exchange, there is no exchange between structure 1 and structure 2. Exchange between 1 and 2 is restricted. When the exchange is restricted, the protons are fixed on sp3 carbon and protons are fixed on sp2 carbon. Become non-equivalent. So sp2, protons of sp3 carbon, protons of sp2 carbons are becoming non-equivalent. At higher temperature, they becoming equivalent, because at higher temperature, when the exchange is fast, no protons are exactly on sp2 carbon and no protons are exactly on sp3 carbon. Therefore, between sp3 protons on sp3 and protons of sp2 carbon become equivalent. One signal appear. At lower temperature, when the transformation, when the exchange between 1 and 2 structure is restricted, there is no exchange. The protons of sp2 as such sp2, the protons of sp3 always sp3. Then there is no exchange. So in between sp2, sp3 carbon, there is a non-equivalency developed between the protons attached with the respective carbon. Therefore, a proton of sp3 attached carbon signal appear separately from the protons attached with sp2 carbon. So sp2 protons are 6 protons, sp2 protons are 4 protons. Is it clear? that is one signal at room temperature, two signals separately at lower temperature is possible only if there is exchange, or we can say in brief, one signal. However, there are two type of carbons in a molecule related to sp3 and sp2 and proton attached with the respective sp2 sp3 carbon, but at room temperature only one signal is appearing. How? One signal at room temperature, that is at higher temperature, can be possible if there is exchange. One signal is possible when there is equivalency. Equivalency is possible only under the conditions of exchange between sp2 and sp3 carbons. That means there is a exchange. One signal supported the exchange between structure 1 and structure 2 for bulvalin. Therefore, it is a fluxinol. Therefore, it is a fluxinol molecule. So, in this way, with the help of NMR signals, we can explain the nature of fluxinol behavior of the molecules. So, you have 3 more examples. We will discuss in the next lecture. With the 3 more examples, NMR spectrum is completed. Then we will go for fluorine NMR in the next lecture. With this, I conclude today's lecture. Thank you.